Senator, thanks for joining us once again. And I've seen some of your colleagues on other networks just in so many words say just very pessimistic about the prospects for this because of, in their view, the speaker's not ready to give a win to President Trump. But then the other side would point out that Leader McConnell probably doesn't have the wherewithal to go through with what the president would want anyway. Is anything going to happen in your view?
Well, first, I'm still getting through the trauma. I grew up with that Marco Polo game, and the thing was very traumatic for me as a child. So the fact that you guys opened with it took me a minute to compose myself. And on the stimulus thing, look, I think the fundamental challenge we face with it is the cost, the dollar figure and how much it is. Clearly, there are Republicans in the Senate that will not vote for a deal that goes at $1.6, $1.8 trillion. Look, I'm not happy about the cost associated with it, but I do think the cost of not doing something is potentially even higher, especially since some of that money that we're talking about in the 1.6, whatever number they arrive at, is repurposed money, like the PPP money that was unused. So it's not new spending. In the end, I think we run the risk here of structural damage to components of our economy if we don't do something. I also think we haven't seen the worst yet from some cities and counties. I'm not talking about cities and counties that ran up big debts on their pension plans prior to the pandemic, but some of the things going on, for example, with local option taxes, that's money that's bonded against for infrastructure spending. They're going to have to pull out of general revenue. They're going to have to pull funds out of general revenue next year to backfill that if those bed taxes go down and so forth. So we have some issues or some housing issues around the country as well. And look, the small business piece is really important. And it's something, I have a meeting this morning with the chair in the House and the vice chair in the House, along with Senator Cardin, my counterpart. We're going to talk about this. So I have more optimism that we're going to have a deal on stimulus. I don't know if it'll be before the election, just simply because of the calendar and some of the time constraints we face. But whether it's right now or early November, I wish it had been yesterday. I wish it had been 3 months ago, but we do need to do more.
Do you think if there weren't political considerations that $500 billion would have been palatable to Speaker Pelosi in terms of it? Obviously, it's not everything that she wants, but there are some really positive and helpful things in the $500 billion. And to have a choice of either taking it or leaving it, I mean, you could take it and then work on all the other things later. If you weren't using it as a cudgel or as leverage or as cynically as something for political reasons, what would preclude you from saying, okay, let's just do that and get this out and then we'll start arguing again?
Yeah, let me pull back the curtain on that. I mean, 3 months ago, their position was, let's come up with something they know they'll never take because nothing will happen. The economy will get bad. The president will get blamed for it, and Republicans will lose elections. That was the attitude that the Democratic leadership took. I think what happened in the interim is that rank and file members of the Democratic Party started pressuring the speaker because it's their districts and the economy and their homes that were being hurt. And so that's where she kind of came off of that position. I still think that they probably prefer a deal post-election. But even if it's pre-election, it'll be too late to really have an impact on the economy. So if we weren't in an election season, I still think there would have been obstacles, but it certainly would have been easier. And that's why I think a post-election situation. But even that's not a guarantee. I mean, depending on how the election turns out, some people may calculate that they could get a better deal in January. So we'll see. Look, I'm cautiously optimistic, but we've already seen this thing take a lot of twists and turns. It's really unfortunate. Especially for small businesses that are getting crushed out there and the jobs that are going to be lost because of this.
Hey, Senator, let me just ask. Oh,
go ahead. No,
I thought I heard you. Go
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. We've had a couple of Democratic senators who have been on this week who also sit on the Small Business Committee and who've been concerned about this. And I've been pretty pointed in asking them if there wasn't a deal that could get done by Pelosi and Mnuchin, would they go ahead and vote to release some of the PPP existing funds just to make sure that small businesses are taken care of? Let me ask you the flip side of that. If something happens that there is a deal that's cut between Pelosi and Mnuchin and it's a much higher number than you feel comfortable with, would you go ahead and vote for that anyway just to get the funds out?
Yeah, look, I'm pretty open. In order to pass something here, and I think we have to remind people this all the time, the only way you pass a law here is you have to have it passed by a Democratic House, a Republican Senate where you still need Democratic votes, and signed by a Republican president. So no one's going to get everything they want here. And from my perspective, that means the bill on this is probably going to be higher than I want it to be. And I'm very uncomfortable with that. That said, I think the price of not doing something is even higher. So as long as it's limited in some way, I mean, as long as it's not crazy, yes, I'm willing to be flexible about it because I think it's that important. I think the damage to our economy is much greater than the benefit of not doing anything would ever be in terms of the debt. So, as I've said before, I'm willing to vote for things I'm not in favor of in order to pass the things I think are essential and important for our country within reason.
Senator, I wanted to ask you, there's about $9 billion that was earmarked for testing that is still being apparently withheld by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services under direction from the White House. Talking about trying to bring the economy back, testing is such a vital, important part of that, of course, in addition to the health of Americans. Do you support distributing that $9 billion for testing right now?
Well, I do, but I don't know all the details behind why it is, or if in fact they're holding it back. I will say this, though, the kind of testing we were doing we need a new kind of testing. In essence, what we need is point of care rapid testing at this point, or a greater expansion and distribution of that. I get it. Those aren't 100% accurate, but they give you will catch enough cases to prevent wider spread. I'm talking about the kind of tests that you can administer, not just on a daily basis in a nursing home or congregate living facility, but you could potentially use in schools, right? If someone comes up symptomatic or whatever it might be, a teacher or somebody who works there, the ability to quickly test them, give them peace of mind, and or send them home for a follow-up PCR test is really critical. So I don't think it's just enough that we save money for testing, but the newer kinds of testing that give you quicker results, simply because that will allow us to take action that can prevent, instead of 3 people being infected, you could wind up with 15 people being infected.
Senator, I'm trying to figure out I'm looking forward now to, even regardless of the election and what happens in terms of big tech, and I'm thinking of the DOJ and Google, and I'm thinking of the Facebook and Twitter with the disputed controversial laptop piece. This is going to be on the Senate or on the plate of DC, and we always talk about the goose and the golden egg. I mean, it's a fine line to try to walk, but what do you think needs to be done on both of those subjects?
Well, I think the fundamental question becomes, and this is a new creature, right? I mean, our laws are written for an era in which news was a television station, a network, a newspaper. Now, news is consumed largely through an aggregator, be it a website that spreads it or what have you and posts it. So the fundamental question here is a tech company, are they a site that basically hosts news content produced by other people, or are they editors that decide what it is you and I can read and see and share with others? That's the fundamental question here, because if they're going to be editors and publishers, then they need to be treated as such for purposes of liability. And I think the second thing that's very concerning here is, and this is why, free speech and all these sorts of things are such a difficult concept to grasp, but an important one, is today I can argue that I'm restricting access to disinformation or misinformation. But tomorrow that could be used to restrict access to inconvenient information, or something I claim is misinformation, but actually is in the eye of the beholder. And that becomes really problematic when it's about political speech, when it's about campaigns. So this is a very important issue, and one we need to think through as a society and as a country, because in the end, I think what we'll find out is that the cost of accessing, the cost of blocking access to information and news is higher in a republic than the cost the cost of not restricting it is much lower than the cost of restricting it in terms of a society's ability to function as a republic.
So, Senator, short of an amendment to the Constitution, you think it's possible to legislate against court packing? I know that you're saying, but that wouldn't hold up, would it?
Well, because it's a third branch of government, so it would be questionable. I do think that we need some institutional stability. The one thing this country really needs now is to protect the stability of our institutions. And I'm not talking about the one thing that's allowed us to survive as a republic for 240 some odd years is the stability of institutions. We've had good presidents, bad presidents, boring presidents. We've had good members of Congress, bad ones, and so forth, and everything in between. That's what you get when you elect human beings to political office. But what has allowed us to sustain throughout this is that the institutions are durable, and that is particularly important when it comes to the court. If we reach a point now where every 4 years or every 2 years, the party that wins doesn't like the outcomes coming from the judiciary, from the Supreme Court, so they want to add new members to it, tip the balance, literally, we'll wind up one day with 25, 35 members of a court. We'll have to build a new Supreme Court building, and not to mention we'll look like a third world country. So we have to bring some stability to that. It is, we've defined in the Constitution how many members of Congress there are based on states and districts. We've defined how many senators there are, 2 per every state. I think it's important that we define, for purposes of stability, what the membership should be of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, but that doesn't answer my question. How do you do that? It's sort of a...
it has to be a constitutional amendment. No, it would have to be, absolutely.
The same people that want to pack the court are not going to be in favor of a constitutional amendment. That'd be harder to get than...
Well, then,
right?
but at least they'll have to tell you where they are on the issue, which they refuse to say now.
Okay. All right, Senator Marco Rubio, thank you. I hated to dredge up those bad childhood memories. Thank you.
That's all right. I'm over it. All right.
Okay. All right, Andrew.